Yes, of course. The uninhabitable residential properties and rates remissions. Who's coming to the table for that one?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Now, we requested this report from you, so
Yes.
Thank you very much for the work that you've done.
I don't have anything specific to say about the report. I'm happy just to essentially field questions if there are any.
Right. Well, I think that it probably just does deserve a little bit of an intro to it, because this was a matter that came up before the election. And it dates back to a decision that we made in August this year, which related to residential properties becoming uninhabitable due to an event beyond an owner's control, and it specifically arose out of the Northwood gas explosion. It was actually a very good report to ask for, because what it did was that it highlighted that with an event we were able to grant rates remissions on a case-by-case basis, which is our current policy. And because we'd done this on other occasions, we had done this in relation to earthquake-affected properties dating back to 2010, 2011. It was, was this a policy that we should review? And I guess what staff have done have come back with a recommendation that we don't review the policy, because the policy is effective in that on a case-by-case basis we make an assessment as to whether it should apply or not. And I personally agree with the recommendation that they've come back with. But I don't regret for a minute having asked for this work to be done. I think it is right and appropriate that we did do, and I've looked at and the report does look at what other councils do, and I think that, generally speaking, it's not something that we would want to have a standard remission process for house fires, for example. Because that would then generate a sort of a mix-up in terms of the roles of insurance, for example, and the role insurance plays in such a situation. I'm sure that's also the case in terms of the Northwood gas explosion, but that was just such a major impact, and that it was enabled to be considered on a separate in a separate way, and I guess in the same way that the earthquakes did as well. So the policy's flexible enough to work when it needs to work, and so I'm very grateful that this report has come this way. So I'm happy to move it, but I note that Aaron, and the Northwood explosion was in your paper, so perhaps if I just open it up for questions first.
Yes, so I did take a bit of extra notice around this particular one, given, as the Mayor just stated, Northwood, but it led me to think about other things that make houses uninhabitable, and we charge rates for services delivered, so on and so forth. So you're either using your house or you are not. And there's a number of other things, and it's fine to call out for if it's an earthquake or you get something that makes the front page of the paper, like your neighbourhood being blown up. But there's a whole lot of other smaller ones, like what happens if someone in your family takes their own life in your house and you can no longer live there, or there's a serious crime in a property, so you don't want to live there or you can't live there yourself. How do those things play out, and can those people then apply to us? Because you can come up with a number of scenarios.
Yes, they can. So on a case-by-case basis, we can look at granting a rates remission.
But the way I read this is that would then come to council.
Correct.
Should it?
Yes. I mean, it's the same as the rates rebate schemes. It's a rates remission. There is a a cost, and rates do not just pay for services delivered to the house, as you know.
Oh, they pay for lots of things.
No, they pay for streets, they pay for footpaths, they pay for
Festivals
parks, they
and-
pay for gardens, they pay for, you know, all of the water networks, all of the, you know, so it pays for everything right across the city. The stormwater, for example, that applies regardless of whether you're living in a particular house or not. So
But the flip side to that argument is, unless you go live in a vehicle, you're going to move to another property that's then paying rates.
correct.
So we get two swipes at that family.
Yep. Look, we set rates under a rating policy that applies in a year, and at the end of when the revaluations are done, if the property's not capable of being inhabited at that point, then obviously the rating value drops significantly. But that is the way the law applies in terms of what is a very poor way of funding local government services.
Right.
But we all know that that's the funding model, that's the problem. I think that having read the report, I actually think that it's right and appropriate that we consider these on a case-by-case basis. I certainly didn't vote to support the Northwood gas explosion rates remission because it made the front page of the paper. I actually felt that it was a particular instance that had the additional shock that, you know, it was what made it more aligned to the earthquake circumstances where such a rates remission was applied. So that was my personal reason for voting that way.
Yeah, and I didn't mean it to sound like it's a political push like that. That was not the intention. It's just that certain events, whereas other families can feel a lot more pain than the people in Northwood did.
That's right.
And they don't want to come in here and make their event known or share it with anyone else. But they cannot live in a property.
They don't have to come in and appear, but the paper does have to come to council. Yeah. So, but I'm happy to move it. Do I have a seconder? Andrew? Yanni?
Thanks. I just want to get clarity when the policy was clarified under 4.7 to know that remissions law apply where insurance is on property.
Yeah.
Been settled. Was that a council decision or was that a staff?
That was a council decision as part of the annual plan
It was.
1920.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if people, obviously with insurance, there's times when people get a lot less than what they need.
Yeah.
Is there any flexibility in terms of on an individual case by case basis for that to be looked at, or is it just a pretty clear black and white policy now?
Sorry, you're talking there about the clarification that
Yeah. So the house
remissions
is
no
still
longer apply
like,
where insurance claims.
for a house
Yeah.
that's waiting for demolition, can't be lived in, not habitable, is now paying a lot more in rates if people have settled with their insurance company,
Yeah.
even though they may not be, actually in any better position really, because they've still got another place that they're having to look after.
Right. Okay, I confess I'm not entirely sure of the question, sorry.
Right.
But let's say that if there are, we ask people if there has been an insurance claim settled on the property, and if they respond yes, then we have removed them from receiving the earthquake remission. There really are only like 11 properties remaining on that remission, so most have disappeared from that.
And the
that
house
remission.
will be valued at land only. The property will be
Yeah.
valued.
That's right.
So the property will also be valued at basically the value of the land, because the improvements will have very little value at all if it's to be demolished.
Right, okay.
All right.
I mean, the action is within the hands of the rate payer if they've received their money.
Yeah, no, I get that, but some
Yeah.
people sometimes have to wait for, things to happen in terms of once they've got the settlement, they still have a process to go through to get things like property demolished, etc.
You've got 11 people that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Aaron.